that my colleague spoke of perfection today, because I've chosen to actually speak of failure and to look at failure as a life coach. How does failure apply to my life? What can I learn from failure? Now, for the last 2 weeks, I've dealt with some really hardships. I've dealt with things in my family and other areas of my personal life. I've dealt with my finances, with my profession. And so the word failure and the feeling of failure has cropped up over and over again. So today I've decided to look at failure, because a student of mine gave a speech in which she did look at failure. And she came up with this phrase that resonated within my soul and just echoed and echoed until I said, this is it. This is for me. And she said, apply that mistake and throw it back at the problem. Now, I don't know exactly why it resonated. It seemed like improper grammar and it just echoed. But when it touched my heart and I actually thought about what she said, that led me to re-examining these last 2 weeks and to find that failure has actually been a foundation. So when I thought about her words, I thought, how do they apply? Apply that mistake and throw it back at the problem. What she meant was, take your failure and learn from it, grow from it, and apply it until your problem is no longer a problem, until you found a solution. So I look back. These 2 weeks, I felt like a failure as a mother. My son has gone through some troubles that I cannot mention, but it's the kind that no parent ever wants to hear their child has gone through. And as he sat in tears, and as tears welled up inside of me and spilled out towards my eyes and from my heart, I felt like a failure. Inside my head said, I failed. Inside my heart broke and said, I failed. Inside my skin trembled with the very fibers of failure. I was broken. And yet I had to put on a perfect face and teach these students. So one day I'm teaching these students because they had failed the ACT practice exam. And as I'm talking to them, it dawned on me that this is just a moment in time. This is not the big picture. Because as we all know, teenagers don't see the big picture. And so I'm telling them they don't see the big picture. And in talking to them, my voice echoed inside my own head. And I realized that what was happening at that moment, the bricks of failure that were thrown at me, were not forever. They were for that moment. They were my foundation. And when I look at my bank account and I see negative or close to negative cents, really, which don't make sense. I mean, I have a full-time job and I've worked at it for 7 years, and yet I'm still scraping by. I look at my finances and I see the negative. I see the failure. 4 years of education, $130,000 in loans. And I can't do better than this. What I had to understand this week is that my finances weren't a failure. My finances were a testament of where I'd come from. Because when Social Security sent that that mail-in, that had a list of all my income from the minute I entered Uncle Sam's workforce, I went from $1,000 to $2,000 to $4,000 to $8,000 to $17,000 to $34,000 to now where I stand at $40,000 a year. That is not failure. That is progress. So that's my finances. And then I thought about my professional life. I'm a person that people have said since I was young, you are not reaching for your potential. I gave a speech earlier this year where I talked about a student telling me, Miss Cannon, why are you a teacher? You have more potential than that. This morning, when I encountered a student right before school looking quite haggard in the face, her face drawn down, her eyes too, and her heart so heavy it seemed to drag along with her feet, is when I got the answer that yes, I am living up to my potential, at least right now. Because as I spoke to that young lady, and I found that she was going through a similar problem, the same problem that had broken me down for the past 2 weeks. And I gave her advice as a child to her mother, rather than feeling the way I was from a mother to my child. I heard the other argument. And I realized I wasn't failing my child. I was doing the best that I could. And I had to help my child see that there was more for him so that he can do the best that he could. As I spoke to her, I spoke to me. And I realized I'm not a failure. I am laying down the bricks, the foundations upon which I stand, so I can rise higher and higher. So I thought about her words again. Apply that mistake and throw it at the problem. What mistake have I made? Looking at my life as a failure. How do I apply it to the problem? See the future in the foundation and make progress. So I ask you to do the same thing. Many times we feel like we're failures. We feel like we're not living up to our potential. We feel like we need to have more income, or we need to be better with our families, or etc. But what you really need to do is take stock about your life. And maybe you are not a failure. Maybe you're building a future. So grab those bricks and stand upon them and stand on top.